David Matus is actually Jewish, and he's been a student of the Holocaust, and he's done an enormous amount of work on that. In fact, he's on the Raoul Wallenberg investigation committee. We're both actually from the same city in Canada. We actually knew each other when we were very young, 16 or 17, at university together, and we've both been interested in human dignity for all our lives, really. My mother and father were lucky enough that they could have caregivers in our home in the late 40s and 50s who had come from places like Poland and other countries where the Russians, Soviet Union had been and had done terrible things to people. And so these wonderful women would tell me what had happened to their family or their cousins and at the hands of the Russians. So I think I learned about communism when I was maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years old. And so I had a sort of inner understanding of it. And so when I learned what the Communist Party was doing in China, it was not it sort of brought back memories of what the Russians did to people in Central Europe and Eastern Europe. People I had known and loved. They were dear, dear, dear friends. So I guess it may have started there. And over the years, I've known people from Rwanda, friends from Rwanda, people from Ukraine, a lot of countries that have been treated abominably by totalitarian regimes, whether Nazi or communist. And as far as I'm concerned, they're virtually the same. The Nazis and the communists had, yes, there were differences, of course, but the methods were the same and are the same today. The totalitarian governments of any stripe think that people have no dignity, they have no value, and that they can do anything they want to them. And I sometimes worry that human life in China today has no value whatsoever. And when you see what's happening to the Falun Gong practitioners, you would have to think that's true. We were asked to investigate by the coalition to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong, and two of us agreed to do it independently. And when we both learned the other was going to be doing it, I think we were both delighted. We've been doing it. We've been adding to our knowledge for 7 years, and I think initially on our first report we did it after 4 or 5 months, and we were convinced that the allegations were true, that the Falun Gong community were being killed for their organs, and their organs were being sold to organ tourists from abroad and to wealthy Chinese. And then we did a follow-up report, and then I guess we did the book in 2009. And by that point, we had received so much evidence that we had no doubt whatsoever in our minds that this we call a new crime against humanity, or a new form of evil in the world, was going on. And the people that say, I even heard this on this trip, that we need more evidence. Well, I think if you look at it, we have 52 kinds of evidence. And for some people, we'll never have enough evidence. But if we had 152, they'd say, we need more evidence. But for fair-minded people in governments and parliamentarians and so on, and journalists, I don't think there's any doubt that the case has been proven. The fact that the government of China is now talking about stopping organ transplants from prisoners, of course, they never mention Falun Gong prisoners. They always talk about prisoners who are subject to capital punishment. Wang Jiefu, for example, the former Deputy Minister of Health, always talks about convicted criminals. And I've never heard the word Falun Gong come out of his mouth. He's admitted, for example, that he did 2 liver transplants for, I think since 1989, every week. And now he's involved with this new donation program. And I hope it works. I hope they do stop using organs from all prisoners. But since it's so profitable and they've been doing it for so long, I think it's going to take even more pressure from the world community. And I think we're at the tipping point where we're finding that, talking to parliamentarians in Asia and North America and Europe, I think we're at the point now where parliamentarians are going to pass laws that say it's if you buy a trafficked organ, pay for an organ, that's an offense. And New South Wales is talking about this. In Australia, we've been to the Irish Parliament, and I think they're looking at this sympathetically. I was in the British Parliament last week. So, and now, of course, in Sweden, I hope that parliaments will pass laws like this right across the world. We're going to keep going until this stops, along with thousands and thousands, if not millions of other people, until the the pillaging of organs of Falun Gong stops in China. We are going to keep going. We're going to last longer than the party state in China. When they stop, we will stop. Gao Zhisheng is, in my view, he's a Nelson Mandela or a Mahatma Gandhi figure in China. He's called the conscience of China. He's an extraordinary person who was born and raised in a cave, of all things. His family was so poor that he couldn't go to university. He couldn't go to law school. When he got out of the army, he managed to pass the bar exam, which it shows you how brilliant he is. And then he became one of China's 10 best lawyers. He defended the poor, the disabled, the farmers who were being thrown off their land. He was a national hero. And then one day he decided, I have to defend Falun Gong because they're being treated atrociously, inhumanly. And he took up that cause, and it seems to me that that's the only thing that caused the party state to come down on him like a ton of bricks. And his license was taken away. Do you know they had policemen living in their home? He was in jail, but living with his wife and 2 children. There were policemen in the house. Adolf Hitler couldn't have designed a worse form of intimidation, persecution. So he's been in jail now off and on for 7 years. He's been tortured inhumanly, barbarically. They've done things to him that no regime in the 20th, 21st, or any century should do to any human being, let alone a model citizen like Gao Zhisheng. So we've actually, David Matas and I and others have nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and I still hope that he'll get it. Possibly, I've had some encouragement that maybe he'll get it this year or next year. In a democratic China, I'm convinced that somebody like him would end up as the leader of the country. They're certainly afraid of him. I mean, just as the apartheid regime in South Africa was afraid of Nelson Mandela, then they came to realize that the only way they were going to be saved from terrible things happening to the regime was to let a man who believes in forgiveness and reconciliation become president of a democratic South Africa. And of course, Nelson Mandela did exactly that. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't seek to shoot people and that sort of thing. He wanted people to get along, and he did it better than perhaps anybody in recent history. So that's what a Gao Zhisheng would do for the party in China, in my view. He would not take revenge on them the way the regime has taken revenge on him. That's why I say he's like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi. Many people simply cannot believe that in the 21st century something like this could be happening. It's something out of science fiction. It's something out of a horror story or a horror movie. And in fact, they made a horror movie about it a few years ago. And there was one made in Korea where a young couple were on their honeymoon, and they went to China. And somehow the woman disappeared and her organs were taken from her. And this was a very popular fictional movie, but we're not talking fiction, we're talking reality. So people don't want to believe it. That's the first thing, and that's perfectly understandable. But at some point, even though you don't want to believe something, if the evidence is simply overwhelming, you've got to tell yourself that you've got to accept it and then to do something about it. That's the problem, is a lot of people probably accept that it's happening, but they just don't want to do anything about it, and they have to do something about it. We all have to do something about it. We have about 20 recommendations in our book, or both books, but probably the best one is that the countries outside of China should stop buying the organs from China. That's one way. Then we have to do about many other things, but we have to any place anybody from China goes, they have to be confronted with this thing. You are killing your own citizens who do gentle exercises and who are nonviolent, who are non-political, who believe in truth, compassion, forbearance, as the Falun Gong community does. You are killing these people for their organs. What outrageous behavior! Are you a civilized government? Are you worse than Hitler? Are you worse than Stalin? We can all do something. We can phone our member of parliament. We can write a letter to the editor. We can go to a cocktail party and tell a Chinese diplomat that this is terrible what they're doing. I was at an event in Korea last year, and somebody from the Chinese, he's not in the government, he's from a non-government organization in China. He got up and he made this wonderful speech about the environment. And it was most of it was nonsense as far as I'm concerned, but he made the speech. And so I got up and asked him, well, when is your government going to stop killing its own people for their organs? And he sort of stumbled around, and the usual answer, he said, oh, there's no evidence of that it's happening, and, just gibberish. So we all have opportunities when we can confront either the officials of the government or citizens of China, and if they realize they're being ridiculed wherever they go and condemned wherever they go, I think the pressure would build from the top, and the people at the top would respond. I think they're doing it actually now. I think the fact that this latest plenary of the party last week and the week before has come out and saying they're not going to take organs from prisoners anymore is a step in the right direction. It's easy to promise this, and it's been promised before, but the fact that they feel they have to promise it shows that they're getting a lot of pressure within the country and from outside the country. And basically, naming and shaming is the thing that I'm convinced that the party state in China responds to. And people say, oh no, don't upset them, don't say anything like this. But no, what they need to hear is people saying, there is not another government in the world that kills its own citizens and sells their organs to foreigners, let alone nationals. Basically, it's about $500,000. If a Falun Gong practitioner is killed and their organs are sold, now the organs don't last very long. They have to be transplanted quickly. But if they could transplant all the organs, including skin and lungs and everything, I mean, it's corneas. If they could transplant all of those immediately before the organs become unusable, I think it adds up to about $500,000. But if you take 60,000 Falun Gong practitioners times $500,000, what does that work out to? It's a huge amount of money, and if there was ill-begotten proceeds from crime against humanity, that's it. We are asking people if they can get the name of a doctor or doctors who are doing these transplants to please get us their names. We have a number of the names in our recordings where we phoned a hospital and a doctor will identify himself and will say, yes, there are Falun Gong practitioners available for taking organs from. And we've got their names, but we want all the names we can get so that these names can be provided to the International Criminal Court. And these people, I hope, will be on the docket in front of the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, because that's what these things are. And so, hopefully doctors, if they realize that people are trying to get their names and are getting their names, some of them will say, I'm not going to do these operations anymore. And I have one of the examples we cite in the book is a doctor who removed, it's hideous, he removed the corneas from 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners over a 2-year period. And we have his name and so on, and eventually he stopped. He was having nightmares, he couldn't sleep, and he'd been paid the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of US dollars, his wife told us, and he left the country. I'm not sure where he is now, but these are the kinds of people we want their names and their as much information about them as we can, so that we can have them ready when hopefully when China becomes a democratic country, these people will go to the International Criminal Court. We can imagine 2,000 over a 2-year period. They were being run through his operating room at a pretty high rate of speed. It only takes about 20 minutes, I'm told, for remove a cornea from somebody's eye, or 2 corneas. But these were people who were being forced to do this. It was a crime against humanity of the worst kind. He would take the corneas out, and then they were under anesthetic. They'd be taken into another room, and then all their organs would be taken out. Initially in several other rooms, but finally they did all the operations in one room, and then the bodies were burned. So 2,000 people were killed just in that one hospital. The doctor knew they were Falun Gong practitioners, and he told his wife this. Now, I was a prosecutor for 10 years, and somebody's going to say, well, that's hearsay evidence, because you have to get that out of his mouth, not out of his wife's mouth. But reasonable people who aren't hung up over fine points of procedure would accept, I think, readily that, and especially if they read her statement, which is in our report, which is available in 18 languages on our website, david-kilgour.com, would read her statement and would say, this is a woman who's been told all these things by her husband, and it's as if it's coming from his mouth. And since he won't talk to you, you can't talk to him. You can count on his wife's evidence. And if you don't like her evidence, and some people don't, you've got 51 other kinds of evidence. And at some point, 51, 50, 49, at some point, most people will say, yes, I am absolutely convinced this is happening. And unfortunately, most people, David Matus and I are completely convinced it's happening. And we've become more and more certain it's happening as we talk to more people. We talked to one person, I better not mention the country. He's doing fine. His health is good. But he told me that over about a year-long period, he went to the Shanghai #1 People's Hospital twice. First time, a Major Tan, a surgeon in military uniform, of all things, brought him 4 sets of kidneys, and none of the kidneys were compatible with his body. So he went home for 3 months, came back about 3 months later, and he got 4 more sets of kidneys. And finally, the 8th set of kidneys worked, and he's home doing fine. But 8 human beings are dead. And I'm sure that, I don't have the names, but I'm sure that at least half of those people are Falun Gong. Victims who've been convicted of no crime. A policeman has signed a little form, and they go off to the forced labor camp. And then, as I explained to people, when the computer says that you're a match for somebody in Shanghai hospital coming from Canada or Sweden or someplace, that person is killed. And the person comes home with a new kidney or liver, and of course they're told they're getting it from a convicted murderer or something. But we explained very clearly that the only people in these camps who are examined medically every 3 months are the Falun Gong practitioners. And the other prisoners aren't examined at all. So it's for obvious reasons that the Falun Gong, because they don't smoke and drink, are considered to be the best people to get organs from. So it's a no-brainer for people to, I think, understand if they know these things, that Falun Gong practitioners are being killed for their organs. How many? We're asked that a lot. David Matus and I estimated that from 2001 to 2005-06, it was about 41,500 transplants could only be explained as coming from Falun Gong practitioners. Ethan Gutman, who went at his research in a different way, estimates that it's about 60,000 Falun Gong practitioners have been killed for their organs in these forced labor or concentration camps. And if you project us up to 2008 too, our figures are remarkably similar. It's sort of 50, 60,000 human beings have been killed for their organs in China. An awful lot of people have been sent there, as you know, on the police signature. There's no hearing, there's no appeal, there's no trial, there's no charge. Some obedient policeman comes up to somebody and says, you're going to a camp, signs the form, and off they go for up to 4 years. That's a method that was devised by Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, and was imitated by Mao in the 50s, as I'm sure you know. And the model is still working, 60 years later? Russia long ago got rid of that system. So why is it still working in China? That's the question that we should be asking every Chinese official and every party official that anyone sees anywhere in the world. There are still an awful lot of people, of which probably at least half are Falun Gong practitioners in these camps across China, that are making products like Christmas decorations or garments or toys or you name it. I've talked to people who've got out of these camps. One woman I'm thinking of who told me she used to sew sweaters. Well, in fact, it was Jennifer Zhang told me she used to sew sweaters all day. And other people have told me that too. And where do these products end up? Do they end up in stores here in Stockholm or in Ottawa or New York? I suspect an awful lot of them do. And how come the government of Canada, the government of Sweden allows these products into our countries? What we need, of course, is a law that puts the onus on the importer to show that what he or she's bringing into Sweden or Canada is not made by slave labor, forced labor. The United States has an agreement to ban products from forced labor coming into the U.S., but they don't enforce it. And there's a country in Asia that maybe I better not name that has a free trade agreement with China. And I asked one of the officials what they were going to do to prevent such imports, and he said, "Oh, we're going to have an inspector in Beijing." One inspector. So let's get serious about this. Let's say we're going to show some backbone. We're going to show some smarts on this. We're not going to allow our kids to play with dolls and toys and whatnot that are made by somebody who's working 16 hours a day for no pay in a forced labor camp in China. The 610 office was set up after the persecution, or at the time of the persecution, started in mid-99, July 99, and they were authorized to run this thing across China. And I talked to a policeman in Australia several years ago who had told me that, and this is maybe typical, is that he was told that if somebody was coming out of a labor camp, a Falun Gong practitioner, and that if he and his colleagues had any doubt that the person was going to go back to being a Falun Gong practitioner, he told me they were authorized to shoot the person. Can you imagine giving that authority to the police in a 21st century? Any country. And fortunately for him, he simply said I guess he couldn't take this, and he fled China, and he's now in Australia. I believe he's a citizen of Australia. But that's the kind of mentality that was operating there. It's a lot. It's 52. I think I counted 52, and 52 different kinds of evidence. We usually just say we have numerous kinds of evidence, and some of them anybody can, I think, understand, and others are more complicated and are maybe more indirect. But putting them all together, they amount to I think, a conclusive body of proof that this is happening. We often refer to the phone calls where we would have people speaking excellent Mandarin or Chinese, and they would call hospitals across the country and tell them they were trying to get a Falun Gong organ for transplant, and they'd ask for a doctor, and quite often in the early days they could get doctors who'd tell them in 2006, and the doctor would say, yes, we have things like we have Falun Gong practitioners available through the courts or through the police, and we then I'm trying to find the map here. We then make a note of where it was, and we hired independent translators to make sure it was an accurate transcript, and we have it in the book and in the report and on tape. We've kept these tapes too, and there we are. That's the if you can see the dots there. Wherever there's a dot is where we found a hospital or a detention center where we could get someone saying on tape that they had Falun Gong practitioners available for organ pillaging. Now, if you can imagine, because it's so stupid, one of the things they did to rebut this is they got one of the doctors we spoke to, and I think he's in here, and they got him to say on a tape made by Phoenix Television that, yes, I got a call on that day from somebody calling about this, and yes, I spoke to them, but I didn't say anything about this. I said this, this, and this, denying it, in other words. Now they were doing this in Mandarin, but we had his voice. Did they think we spliced his voice in saying something completely different? But I guess they assume everybody's stupid, that we would we doctored the conversation. So I mean, that's the level of their rebuttal, and it's just so mindless, and it's so stupid that we don't think any reasonable person would have any doubts about the overall effect of the evidence. Of course, you don't see this on television anywhere because these murders are taking place in operating rooms, and nobody's going to get There have been a few photographs that have been taken out, as you know, but it's hard to get it out unless people see it on television. A lot of people don't believe it can happen, and they say, we want to see it on television. Well, we can't show it on television because the surgeons aren't going to take films of it, and the so-called victims the victims are dead. So that's probably the difference. I wish dearly that we could get somebody to film one of these operations, but thus far we haven't been able to get that. We've had some very interesting things happen. I was hearing earlier today, and apparently it's available on Epoch Times, about somebody sent a taped conversation of when Bo Xilai was in the Kempinski Hotel in, was it in Berlin? And somebody taped the conversation where somebody called from the Chinese embassy and said, it's all there. Which room are you, Mr. Bo? And then the question was, well, who authorized you to commit this pillaging of Falun Gong? We've got apparently Bo's voice saying it was President Jiang Zemin. And apparently there's more too that was said, but that's pretty good evidence, because everybody knows it was Jiang Zemin that started the persecution, and now we've got Bo Xilai, who was, as you know, probably the lead persecutor of Falun Gong in his region, his state, admitting it. And this fellow Yang Lijung, the police chief who went into the American consulate, we've had some rather extraordinary statements. Remember, he got an award for doing, I think the figure is the thousands of operations on people taking their organs out, and he's making a speech saying what is it? He said it moves the soul to do something like this. Can you imagine? This is not a human being who's saying this, but he does. So if people are open-minded and they're prepared to look at the evidence, I don't think anybody will have any doubt that this has happened, and it's still happening, and it's got to stop. And as I said earlier, we're going to keep going until it is stopped. We've got a whole chapter in the book on the patients and why they do it and why they're desperate, and somebody thinks they only have 6 months to live, and they say to themselves, well, I'm going to go and get a liver in China. And all these operations are often terribly badly done. The doctors in China won't give any charts now to come back with the patient because they don't want their names to be on it. So a lot of patients, I gather, have the operations badly done. One man I heard about recently was being practically taken into the operating room after paying, I forget how much it was. It was a lot of money he paid for his organ, and somebody said to him, we need another $10,000. So the man, I think, produced the $10,000, and but it's pretty hideous stuff. It's clandestine. There's sort of back corridors in these hospitals. It's just, from what we've heard from people who've gone through it, it's a very sordid process. And you come away with no information to take back to your doctor for aftercare where you came from, and it's just like the mafia of medicine, if you like, and it's an awfully depressing, sordid business. But if people are desperate, they will convince themselves of almost anything, especially when the doctor says to them, well, the organ you have, Mr. Smith, is from a convicted murderer. And so then the person must wonder, well, has this person got AIDS? Have they got some terrible disease? But people are desperate, and we understand that. But and we would do anything to try to encourage people to give more voluntary organs in Canada or Sweden or anywhere. And interestingly enough, one of the countries that's taking the toughest stand on this is Spain. And yet Spain is also the country, as I'm sure you know, that has the highest rate of organ donors, voluntary donors. So, and Israel has discovered with their law that by saying that anybody who signs a form volunteering to donate their organs will have priority when it comes to organ transplants. So they've found that their legislation has apparently increased the number of people signing their donor cards. So there are lots of things that can be done, but one of the things that should not be done is people should not be going to China as organ tourists. The idea is, of course, to throw the brokers in jail, and those are the people to go after. And I think Israel did that, by the way. They put one of the brokers in jail, and once the brokers are out of business, then people don't even know how, even if they want to go, don't know how to access the means of going to China. So the people who really go after the brokers, and these people are unscrupulous people that should be put in jail, in my view. Dr. Jay Lavie, he's got a chapter in this book, and I have so much respect for Dr. Lavie. He didn't believe it was happening until one day one of his patients said, I'm going to get a heart operation, I think it was. I'm going to China next 2 weeks from now to get a heart operation. And Levy says, "You what? They've timed the operation for 2 weeks from now?" And you may not realize then that it takes, with the tissue types and blood type differences, you've got to have a large number of people who are same blood type and tissue type. So he immediately knew that somebody was going to be killed like a chicken in a poultry plant so that he could get a new heart. So that the penny dropped for him on that, and he started the campaign to change the laws in Israel, and he and the members of parliament in Israel did this. And now it's an offense to use a trafficked organ, and nobody has gone from Israel to China since this legislation was passed. So if it works for Israel, why wouldn't it work for Canada or Sweden or any other country where we believe in human dignity and the rule of law? We're not saying you have to name China in this, just have a law that says you cannot buy an organ. And you could build in an onus section that says that if you come back with an organ, you have to show that you made a reasonable effort to find out it was donated and so on. In fact, there's a big uproar going on right now in Sri Lanka. You may have read about this, where Sri Lanka and Colombo is trying to set themselves up as an organ center. And there's a considerable worry that the Rajapaksa government in Sri Lanka may start to use the same methods as China. Certainly the Rajapaksa government in Sri Lanka is far too close, in my view, to the government of China, and they may see this as a chance to make money as well through similar methods. Up to now, Sri Lanka has only been using organs, or one kidney, for example, bought, I gather, in some cases in India. But there's a danger that we get onto a slippery slope, and then other countries which don't have the rule of law or don't have respect for human beings could end up doing the same thing. That's why it's got to be stopped with China, and we've got to draw the line in the sand with China on this issue. He knew what was happening to the people who were anesthetized after he did the corneas. He could see what was happening to them in the next operating room, and I guess eventually he had, as I think I mentioned, he was having nightmares. He couldn't sleep. And his wife, Annie, said to him, "You must stop doing this. It's hideous." He removed the corneas from 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners over a 2-year period. I've seen some other accounts of what's happened to surgeons who do this, but this kind of information does not get out very easily. It's kept very much under control. Yeah, we've heard some really appalling stories, which we account in the book a bit, about how patients are treated and how they're told they have to register, for example, under a Chinese name, because since 2008 there's been a huge pressure on the government not to sell them to foreigners, to sell them only to Chinese nationals. So people will go under and will be registered under a phony name, a Chinese name. But I wish I had more evidence of how it's struck. But let me try to explain that a little bit. I became aware of this quite recently, that with this forced abortion policy for the second child, that somebody was telling me the other day that when a child would be born to a mother who had already had a child, instead of putting the child up for adoption or something, the doctors would stand around in this operating room and they'd think about what's the most effective way of killing the child. So they would, I guess in the one case, they would give the child vaccination with water in the child's head. The child would die. Well, how can you, if you are so dehumanized by doing operations like that, how does it become a problem to take the corneas out of a person's eye or an organ out of a person? Our doctors in the rule of law countries take an oath, of course, to protect human life. But when your medical problem today is how you're going to kill a newborn baby, perfectly healthy newborn baby, what does it do to your sense of humanity and your professional ethics? And I guess that's how these doctors that are doing these operations for lots of money think, well, that's fine. That's just another day. I'm just a butcher in a butcher shop, and this human being is just like a slab of beef or something. I mean, I don't know how they do it. And I've often thought we should ban any doctor involved in organ transplant should not be allowed to go to any civilized country. Now, people will take great offense when I'm in effect saying that China is not a civilized country, but in this area, it's barbaric. And the doctors who are doing it are barbaric. I recall several years ago, there was a transplant conference in Boston, and all the transplant surgeons from around the world came. And one of the surgeons from Tianjin, where they do a lot of this work, was talking to a friend of mine and his wife, and there was a Falun Gong demonstration going on outside the hall, and actually Hillary Clinton spoke to the meeting at about the same time, and this doctor was saying to my friend happened to be from Germany, and the doctor from Tianjin pointed out how many liver transplants they did at his hospital, and my friend said, that's as many liver transplants as we do in all of Germany in a year. And then he said, well, where do you get your organs from? And the doctor's answer, and it's in the book actually, was ask the people demonstrating outside. Now, is that an admission of guilt? I would think that any jury that I've ever appeared in front of would take about 5 minutes on that to find that profession guilty. And I don't know why those people are allowed to go to any transplant conference in countries that practice medicine the way we do in most of the world. I think, in fact, you could probably argue that it's only in China where medicine is practiced this way. This goes back to what I was saying about when human beings have no more value than a goat or something or a chicken. This is the kind of thing that can happen, and it's unimaginable in the 21st century. The party has a parallel government, so in every government office there's a party official who's basically telling the public official what to do. So, yeah, state organs is certainly an accurate title for what happens to organ pillaging in China. It's done by the state, for the state, to the benefit of participants. And the secondary goal in it, if not the primary goal, is to get rid of so-called enemies of the party, the Falun Gong practitioners. The numbers grew so quickly from 92 to 99, 70 to 100 million by the government's own estimates, and their values are so different from the parties that they were terrified of certainly the two factors, if not both. I met a young woman in London whose father was a practitioner, Falun Gong practitioner. He was thrown in jail. He was sentenced to, I think, 11 years in jail. They usually don't bother going to some kind of a court hearing. Her mother was thrown in jail. The police literally sort of dragged her mother away one night, and they left her in the apartment. I think she was 12 or 14 or something like this. And the father was in jail. I mean, this is for believing in truth, compassion, forbearance. It's just impossible for me to understand, and I think for most people to understand how any regime on earth could treat its people this way. But yeah, that was the case. But there's so many cases like that. I mean, we've talked to dozens and dozens of people like this, and they're all wonderfully sweet, kind people without a vicious bone in their body, and they have nothing but goodwill for people, and yet they're treated this way. It's a bit like the way the Christians were treated by the Roman Empire. The people were believed in helping others and kindness and so on. And these monsters from Rome would come along and say, we're going to burn you at the stake, Nero, for example. And they would light Christians, they would light them with fire. And well, the parallels are rather striking, similar. And as we say at the end of this book, if you recall, we say that the values of Falun Gong, truth, compassion, and forbearance, are really the values of most of the Chinese people. And that's probably why this vicious, contemptible group in the party are so unhappy and worried about them. So it's probably based on fear more than anything else that they're treating Falun Gong so badly. The doctors against forced organ harvesting have been the best by far. In fact, we have a wonderful doctor from China coming tomorrow, Dr. Li, coming to speak to the parliamentarians here. Wait till you hear what he has to say. I heard him in London. I heard him in Wales. He's got some new material that is extremely because he explains the mentality of how this could happen, that how you could, your sense of humanity could go so low that you could allow these things to happen. And he's a doctor himself. So we've had some, DAFO is doing the best job. I'm hoping that we can get a thing called Parliamentarians Against Forced Organ Harvesting. That would be wonderful if we could get that going here in Sweden and other countries. We've had the UN rapporteurs against torture have done some good things. European Parliament has had hearings. I think they passed a resolution condemning it. New South Wales Parliament has got a bill to make it a crime to use a trafficked organ. The Irish Parliament looks like they maybe pass a similar bill. I wish I could say the Canadian Parliament was at that stage yet. It's not. But we've had hearings in a number of countries. I think we're getting close to the tipping point where suddenly everybody will realize we've got to have this kind of a legislation. But we're not quite there yet.